Nice char.
Oh, thanks, Carla.
I wouldn't have pegged you as a griller, Claire, but
Well,
having these ribs right now, I realize there is literally nothing you can't do.
hi everyone, I'm Claire. We're in the test kitchen, and today we are making BA's best barbecued ribs. Today I'm using St. Louis style ribs. I'm from St. Louis, so I requested these specially. You can use baby back. There are a couple differences. The St. Louis style ribs tend to be a little bit bigger. They come from the belly section of the ribs, so there's a little bit more fat on them. I love sort of the little bit of cartilage that you get. The baby backs come from closer to the spine, and they're always a little bit smaller. So the term barbecue can be a little bit confusing for people. If you're from certain parts of the South, barbecue means, you know, smoked, long cooked. In this context, we're using a little bit of more of a Yankee definition, and we're going to go from the oven to the grill. So these ribs are dry rubbed first, baked until tender, and then finished on the grill with some barbecue sauce. First, I'm going to put together the dry rub. I have kosher salt. In the test kitchen, we like to use diamond kosher for its sort of fineness and the sort of flakiness. I'm just combining all of these together. I have paprika, dry mustard, some freshly ground black pepper, and for heat, some cayenne. And all I want to do is mix these up and distribute them evenly. I also patted the ribs dry with some paper towels. There's still plenty of moisture so that the dry rub sticks. I'll liberally sprinkle the dry rub all over the ribs on both sides, and then press lightly to help adhere. And then I like to use my hands to sort of massage that spice mix into all of the crevices, to pat it into all the surfaces. Okay, so they've already kind of started to absorb some of that spice rub. And now I will wash my hands and then wrap each rack in 2 layers of foil to bake them. So I have my foil-lined baking sheets. I'm going to individually wrap each rack in a double layer of foil. That contains all of the juices, and then I'll put them back on the foil-lined sheets just in case there's any kind of leaking during baking. And I like to sort of create a seam at the top so that there's less of a chance of the juices leaking out during baking. So I sort of crimp all the way across, and then once I get to the end, kind of like I'm wrapping a present. Okay, so here I have my 5 very tightly sealed, neat packets. And these are going to go into a 350-degree oven until they're tender but not falling off the bone. So I'll show you in a couple hours what that looks like and how to test. So for the St. Louis style, it'll take a little bit longer than the baby back. We're thinking maybe around 3 hours, 2.5 to 3. So we have some ribs that we cooked this morning, actually, brought in as a swap. So I have 4 slightly larger racks of the St. Louis style. I'll show you a trick for testing them while they're baking. Because you go through the trouble of crimping them into these tight foil packets, you don't want to have to unwrap them and have all the hot juices splashing around to test them. So I like to use a cake tester. You could also use like a skewer or even a fork, and just poke through the foil. And your aim is to kind of get between the bones of the ribs to test the meat. So you can see this, once you get through the foil, it slides through the meat pretty easily. What I like to do actually is, instead of unwrapping them completely, is just to stand them up on the end and then poke a hole in the foil and let the juices drain into a measuring cup. There's so much flavor in there, we're not going to throw them out. We're going to use them to fortify some store-bought barbecue sauce. Okay, so now that these are well drained, I can go ahead and unwrap them fully. So you can see that they are nicely encrusted with that spice rub. And the meat has pulled away from the bones a bit, so that's how you know that they are done. So I have Casey Masterpiece today, one of my favorite store-bought sauces. And I'm going to, as I said, fortify store-bought barbecue sauce with all the juices from the ribs. So I'll pour this into about 1.5 cups. And then I have 1.5 cups of barbecue sauce. And with like a thicker style of barbecue sauce like Casey Masterpiece, it's nice to thin it out a little bit. You can get, you can kind of apply multiple coats and get sort of like multiple layers of kind of shellac on the ribs. Here in the test kitchen, we have our gas grill on medium-high. It's been preheating for a while, and I just oiled the grill grates. So I'm going to take everything over there, and we're going to get these on the grill. Now, before I get the ribs on, I'm going to just space them lightly in a coat of this sort of thinned-out sauce. And as I'm grilling them, I'm not really cooking the ribs further. I'm really just trying to caramelize and char that sauce so that it sticks to the ribs and adds that layer of flavor. And I'll continue to baste them as I turn. So I'm going to get the first ones on. And this is much easier if the ribs are cold. When they're cold, they hold together really well. If they're hot, they might want to sort of break apart. So I'm just laying them on the grill, sauce side down. And when they go on, I can also paint the back sides with a little more of the sauce. I have just a regular pastry brush here with natural bristles. You can use the silicone kind as well. And if you're like me and your arm is burning off because the grill is really hot, but your brush has a short handle, you can use your tongs to help you. So I'll turn these frequently just until I see the first side starting to caramelize, but I'm going to get the second racks on as well. So I have a generous amount of sauce here. There's nothing that's uncooked in the sauce, so I can save any remaining sauce for serving. The first ones I put down might be ready to turn. And it can also help to have a flat, flexible spatula when you're grilling. So I'm going to grab, I have a fish spat right here, just to help you get underneath. So you can see that this first side has nice caramelization. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit so that it doesn't caramelize too quickly. And now every time I turn, I'm going to add another layer of sauce. So I'm building up sort of a lacquered finish on the ribs. Now, if you're finding that it's a little bit difficult to manage racks that are the full size, you can always cut them in half and then grill sort of more pieces that are a little bit smaller and easier to turn. And that wouldn't be a bad idea for, you can see some of the racks, the St. Louis style have that tapered end, so that thinner end is going to cook a little bit faster and caramelize, so it's not a bad idea to cut the larger racks in half. So I pulled them off the grill. The grill was really, really hot, so they didn't go the full 10 minutes. They're probably on there for maybe 4 or 5. But you can see I have nice caramelization, sort of an even char across them, and a pretty nice layer of sauce also. So I'm going to bring them back over to the cutting board where we're going to cut them. I'm just going to do it rack by rack. Sometimes with St. Louis ribs, it's a little bit hard to find that area between the bones to cut through. Sometimes you end up cutting through cartilage. That's fine. You can just use a sharp knife. With baby backs, it's a little bit easier. And then when you get to the end, you can leave the 2 bones together so you get a little bit of a bigger piece. And then I'll just arrange them on this platter. And at this stage, you can add a little bit more sauce, or you can put some off to the side for people to add their own during eating. As a kid, I loved dinners where we had pork ribs, and one of the reasons is because you have to eat them with your hands, and I love eating with my hands. So fun when you eat with your hands. Do you want a little more sauce? We have sauce on the side. All right, well,
great job.
thanks. You got a whole 8 pounds of them. These are such a great recipe for summer barbecues, cookouts. You can make them ahead, so the prep is really, really simple. Kind of foolproof, right?
Foolproof.